It seems there's been a misunderstanding, ma'am. We need you to move so we can accommodate one of our VIP passengers. Jessica, the flight attendant, spoke with a haughty tone, even as she kept her voice polite. This seat is reserved exclusively for our platinum members. You don't qualify to sit here. Just behind her stood Karen Whitfield, a sharply dressed white woman whose expensive watch gleamed under the first-class cabin lights, tapping her fingers impatiently on the little table before seat 2A, her gaze flicking irritably at Maya Richardson. To Karen, 2A wasn't merely a seat, it was her personal domain, an unquestioned privilege she presumed hers by right. I always sit there, it's practically my seat, Karen muttered loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, her voice laced with arrogance and disdain. Maya looked up, calm but with a flash of surprise in her eyes. She'd booked well in advance, paid in full, arrived on time, and was indisputably a genuine platinum member. And yet, simply because of her appearance and skin color, her rightful seat had suddenly become inconvenient. Unhurried, Maya opened her wallet, produced her platinum membership card, and held it out firmly to Jessica. I am a platinum member, and this seat is assigned to me. Jessica's polite smile stiffened. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, but she quickly slipped back into the practiced hardness of someone used to catering to the privileged. I understand, ma'am, but this seat is usually given to an even more distinguished guest. She glanced pointedly at Karen Whitfield, adding, one of our frequent platinum flyers. The implication was clear. By any measure, Maya didn't belong. Nearby, passengers had begun to notice. A few phones slid out. Curious and indignant looks spread through the cabin. Yet none of them, neither Jessica nor Karen nor any other on this flight, realized that this small act of discrimination would soon embroil Skylux Airlines in an unprecedented crisis. The woman they were dismissing today would hold their fate in her hands tomorrow. That very morning, soft amber light had washed through the windows of Los Angeles International Airport, illuminating the first-class lounge. Maya Richardson had arrived with her signature confidence. Walking steadily, laptop tote in hand, her curls pinned neatly, her eyes bright and posture poised like that of a modern leader. At 32, Maya was the CEO and founder of Right Tech Solutions, a billion-dollar AI company pioneering bias mitigation tools in customer service. She was bound for New York to deliver the keynote at the Global Ethics and Technology Conference, where she was hailed as the star of the next generation of leadership. Maya had chosen Seat 2A, a window-side spot at the very front of the cabin, renowned for its comfort and ideal workspace. It was the very seat she'd reserved weeks ago, paid for as part of her first-class fare, and confirmed through her platinum membership, Skylux's highest tier of loyalty. Yet mere minutes after settling in, Maya sensed the cold stare of a well-dressed white woman boarding behind her. Karen Whitfield, a long-standing Skylux customer infamous in business circles for her controlling demands and penchant for making flight attendants jump, stopped beside Maya, peered at her ticket, then leveled a stern look at her. This seat, 2A, is always mine. I sit here on every flight. Her words weren't just for Maya. They were a proclamation to every passenger within earshot. Instantly, tension crackled in the cabin. Lead flight attendant Jessica Miller, accustomed to placating VIPs, approached with an awkward smile, her tone polite but icy. Pardon me, ma'am, but it appears there's been a mix-up. We need you to move so we can seat our regular platinum guest. Maya lifted her gaze, maintained her courteous smile, and calmly presented her platinum card and boarding pass. I am a Skylux Platinum member, and this is the seat assigned to me. I reserved it 2 weeks ago. Jessica glanced at the card. Surprise flickered across her professional facade before vanishing. She looked from Maya to Karen as though seeking approval from the wealthier passenger rather than enforcing company policy. Karen tapped her watch impatiently and declared loudly, "That seat is mine. I always sit there on my usual flight." Whispers and murmured exclamations rippled through the cabin. Passengers exchanged looks that ranged from sympathy to shock. Maya understood this wasn't about a mere seat. It was a moment when every eye, friend and foe alike, fixed on her. What none of them knew was that this petty act of discrimination would mark the beginning of Skylux's downfall. And through it all, Maya Richardson remained seated in 2A, steadfast, unbowed, her gaze unwavering, determined not to yield to injustice, however small. The air in the first-class cabin felt even more stifling after Maya's firm reply. Jessica Miller stood silent for a few seconds, her eyes flicking from the platinum card in Maya's hand to Karen Whitfield's face, then sweeping over the plush seats that had long been the unspoken territory of regular high-rolling patrons like Karen. Jessica's hesitation wasn't just protocol. In every gesture and every glance lay the shadow of an implicit value system, one that reserved its favors for the usuals, the people who fit the airline's ideal image. Jessica bent slightly at the waist, lowering her voice in an attempt to sound gentle, though still laced with pressure. "I understand, Miss Richardson, but this seat is typically held for our long-standing platinum members, such as Miss Whitfield here. I hope you'll understand. May I offer you another first-class seat with the same amenities? We just want to ensure our loyal guests receive the best possible service." Elsewhere, that might have sounded diplomatic, but here it only laid bare the prejudice ingrained in the carrier's service ethos. Polite words masking exclusion, a denial of Maya's rightful place. Maya recognized it, but her gaze remained steady. She looked Jessica in the eye and spoke calmly yet resolutely, without the slightest concession. "Thank you, but I booked this seat well in advance. I am a platinum member and followed the proper booking process. I cannot move." Though softly spoken, Maya's refusal sent a silent ripple through the cabin. Some passengers exchanged uneasy looks. Others watched in silence, phones already trained on the scene. In that moment, discrimination ceased to be an undercurrent. It became the overt topic of conversation, confronting a bias many had assumed but rarely acknowledged. Karen Whitfield, Hermes bag in hand, dressed in a flawlessly tailored gray suit, her hair impeccably styled, now revealed her displeasure. The composed poise of a high society lady gave way to a scowl and obvious irritation. In Karen's eyes, Maya was an intruder, not for her youth or her simple attire, but for her darker skin and her audacity to challenge entrenched privilege. Karen swept her gaze across the cabin, then leaned in close, her voice a hushed yet commanding whisper. "I sincerely hope this flight won't be delayed over such a trivial mix-up. Miss Miller, you understand what I'm saying, right?" It was more than a remark. It was an unspoken order to Jessica about Karen's status and clout on this flight. Karen didn't need to state it outright. She knew exactly how much the airline valued her, always leaving generous tips after each trip. And as part of this familiar charade, Karen discreetly unfolded a stack of crisp bills and slipped them into Jessica's coat pocket while pretending to rearrange her bag in the overhead bin. One subtle touch, one knowing look, and Jessica understood. That brief, clandestine moment marked an irreversible line crossed. From unspoken favoritism for regulars, Jessica had willingly become an accomplice, accepting Karen's money in exchange for silence and special treatment. What had once been her soft skills had curdled into a brazen bribe, veiled by the luxury and authority of a VIP. Outside, cabin music played and service continued as usual, but deep within first class, the masks were falling away, exposing the raw truth about prejudice, power, and the lengths to which people will go to please a chosen few. From her seat, Maya felt every undercurrent. Yet she remained upright, eyes fixed on the window, her hand gripping her boarding pass and platinum card. She knew this undercurrent was far from over, and in that instant, a real confrontation had begun. The clash between a legacy of prejudice and the promise of justice. The air in the first-class cabin grew heavy, like a charged cloud waiting for a spark. After Jessica cast a discreet glance toward the front of the cabin, the arrival of Trevor Davis, the first-class supervisor, known to both passengers and crew as a man who wore authority like armor, made the flight attendants hold their breath. Trevor didn't bother with pleasantries. With purposeful strides and his tall frame, he blocked the aisle, leaning down toward Maya's seat, his gaze cold and commanding. His voice was low and firm, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Ms. Richardson, I'm the first-class supervisor on this flight. There appears to be a mistake with the seating. This seat is always reserved for our specially prioritized customers. We require you to cooperate and move to another seat so we can accommodate one of our long-standing patrons." Phrases like "specially prioritized" and "long-standing patron" weren't just explanatory. They were sharp needles aimed at Maya's pride and at anyone who'd ever felt excluded for not belonging to that privileged few. Maya met Trevor's eyes calmly and replied, "Mr. Davis, I am a platinum member. This is the seat assigned on my ticket, and I reserved it exactly like anyone else. I have no reason to give it up." Trevor's expression darkened, a forced smile twitching at his lips. He lowered his voice to a whisper meant only for Maya. "You should reconsider your attitude. We don't want to make a fuss, but I can make your experience very unpleasant. Don't fight the system, Ms. Richardson." His words were both a threat and an assertion of the absolute power he believed he held at 30,000 feet. In his eyes, Maya was merely an outsider, someone easily removed if she blocked the unwritten flow of privilege. Nearby, passengers leaned in, their attention captured. Some exchanged looks of indignation. Others surreptitiously pulled out phones, cameras already rolling. A middle-aged woman murmured to her neighbor, "It's clearly discrimination. She showed her platinum card." Meanwhile, Karen Whitfield sat perched against the cabin wall, gripping her designer handbag, a triumphant smirk on her lips as though she'd reclaimed her territory. Her eyes roved like a general surveying the battlefield, each gesture, each glance dripping with the self-satisfaction of one accustomed to being served at another's expense. Maya remained unmoved, sitting upright with steely resolve. Her presence was not merely that of a wronged passenger, but a symbol for everyone ever pushed to the margins by invisible rules of privilege. Seeing that persuasion, coercion, and even threats had failed, Trevor finally lost his composure. He straightened, signaled to Jessica, and announced coolly to the entire cabin, "If she still refuses to comply, I will report this to the captain. Ms. Richardson, this is your final opportunity to move seats voluntarily." Jessica shifted uneasily beside him, concern flickering across her face even as she tried to hide her complicity. Karen's lip curled in anticipation, as though she already foresaw her ultimate victory. But the first-class cabin was no longer governed solely by unwritten rules. Passengers' focused attention, silent cameras, and rising whispers sketched a clear picture of power and of archaic privileges trembling before inevitable change. And Maya, seated tall in the eye of the storm, knew the tide was about to break. One more call, and everything would slip from Trevor's control. Trevor pressed the button on his headset to notify the captain, his glare ready to unleash all the fury of a system threatened by a young woman's courage. The tempest had truly begun, and no one in first class dared breathe too deeply as they waited for the climax of this unprecedented showdown. Less than 2 minutes after Trevor pressed the call button, the entire first-class cabin fell silent, as though the very air was holding its breath for what was about to happen. At the front of the cabin, the cockpit door swung open, and Captain James Reynolds emerged with measured, authoritative strides. His uniform was crisp, his salt-and-pepper hair neatly trimmed, and his gray eyes gleamed with the quiet power he'd honed over 3 decades in the sky. This was the look of someone used to having the final say and absolute respect. Reynolds paused beside Trevor, glanced at Jessica, then fixed his gaze on Maya. He neither smiled nor exchanged pleasantries. He went straight to the point, his voice low but resonant enough that even the furthest passengers sat up. "Miss Richardson, I've been informed of a seating issue in first class. Under Skylux Airlines policy, my crew has full authority to adjust passenger seating to ensure convenience and satisfaction for our regular clients." He let that hang in the air, looking meaningfully at Maya, then continued, this time with deliberate pressure. "I must ask you to cooperate by moving to another first-class seat. If you continue to refuse, I will have no choice but to request airport security be involved. Please reconsider." In that moment, the notion of customer service revealed itself as a stark ultimatum. Bow to invisible privileges, or face the full force of a system powerful enough to crush anyone who defies it. The captain's presence, the ultimate symbol of in-flight authority, pulled the tension taut. There was no gentleness left, no hint of polite compromise. They had entered an uncompromising zone. All eyes in the cabin turned to Maya. Some passengers held their breath. Others exchanged worried glances. A few discreetly recorded the confrontation, hoping to capture the breaking point. The pressure inside outweighed the storm raging outside. Maya inhaled deeply, maintaining perfect poise and unwavering eye contact. Her lips pressed together in quiet resolve, betraying no fear. She looked up at Captain Reynolds and, word by word, spoke with calm strength. "I respect safety regulations, but I'm also a Platinum member who legitimately reserved this seat. I won't relinquish the position I purchased just because another regular guest prefers it." A heavy pause followed. Reynolds' patience vanished, replaced by irritation and the rare confusion of encountering resistance on one of his flights. Trevor stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes locked on Maya, while Jessica hovered nervously, her unease not for Maya's sake but for the airline's polished facade teetering on the brink. Reynolds' tone hardened. "If you persist, I'll have to call security. This is my final warning." A murmur of outrage rippled through the cabin. An older gentleman shook his head in disbelief. A young woman whispered to her neighbor, "Unbelievable. They're bullying her just because she's not one of their regulars." Yet no one dared speak up. The weight of the captain's uniform still ruled this sky. Maya remained composed and nodded slightly. Her gaze drilled into Reynolds' eyes, unwavering. "Do what you think is right. I will do what I believe is right." And with that, the decision was made. Reynolds tapped his headset to summon ground security via Trevor. The first-class cabin froze. Curious and indignant stares, quiet sighs, the soft tap of fingers on phone screens all underscoring a dark comedy of power, privilege, and courage teetering on its climax. Somewhere beyond that closed door, security's footsteps were drawing closer. Maya Richardson, a young, black CEO of remarkable resolve, now faced not only prejudice and invisible authority, but a system ready to eject her from the upper echelons with a single order. Yet, from this moment on, her story had outgrown the confines of an airplane seat. It had ignited a firestorm against injustice that would not be so easily extinguished. The cabin door slid open with a soft click, merging into the heavy, charged atmosphere of a first class, where every eye remained fixed on the standoff between Maya Richardson and Skylux Airlines power trio. Heartbeats seemed to slow as two uniformed security officers appeared at the entrance, faces stern, stepping firmly along the carpeted aisle straight toward Seat 2A. The authority of their dark blue uniforms filled the cabin, thickening the tension even further. Passengers who'd once felt like mere bystanders were now swept up in the vortex of injustice at Maya's center. Whispers, quickened breaths, and the clash of privilege formed an invisible hum everyone could feel. Maya Richardson sat upright, phone firmly in hand, her eyes never leaving the two officers. No tremor of fear, nor a hint of arrogance, just calm resolve. In any other context, that composure would command respect, but to the three figures of authority, it was merely a stubborn thorn, a problem to be dealt with. "Ma'am, please gather your belongings and vacate this seat," one officer announced in a steady, even tone, as if performing a routine task rather than enforcing a blatant wrong. "Crew request." Maya turned on her phone's camera, hitting record. She spoke slowly, each word clear enough to be picked up by the mic. "I am Maya Richardson, a platinum member. This seat was legitimately reserved for me. I've been told to leave without any explanation of wrongdoing." Trevor Davis frowned, his hand clenching into a fist. Jessica Miller looked away, eyes brimming with tears, yet lacking the courage to speak. Karen Whitfield, her Hermes bag in her lap, satisfaction etched across her features, could barely hide her cold triumph, each crease around her mouth celebrating what she believed was victory, oblivious to the cost she and her privileged protectors would someday pay. The officers repeated their demand, though neither dared stare too long at Maya. Under the cabin's muted golden lights, the truth loomed large. They were not dispensing justice, but rather serving as henchmen for a flawed system, manipulated by those who feared losing their fragile grip on power. Maya knew it, but instead of arguing, she held her camera up, capturing Trevor's icy expression, Jessica's discomfort, and even Captain Reynolds standing at a distance, arms folded. "Could you tell me exactly why? I'm in the correct seat with a valid ticket and platinum card. Am I being removed simply because another customer prefers this spot?" An officer exchanged awkward glances and replied in a robotic tone, "We're following crew instructions. Please comply, or we'll have to enforce it." Murmurs of discontent rippled through first class. A middle-aged woman in row 3B spoke up, louder than before. "This is unfair. She hasn't done anything wrong." An older gentleman across the aisle shook his head and muttered to his neighbor, "She has first-class fare and a membership card. Now they treat her like a criminal." Phones clicked on. Some passengers started live streaming, comments flooding in. "Discrimination in real time. Unbelievable. Is this really the U.S. in 2025? Number justice for Maya." Maya refused to yield. She methodically packed her laptop, documents, and small handbag, each motion a quiet act of dignity. If they intended to humiliate her, they would at least witness her unwavering self-respect. When Maya stood, the space between her and Karen felt like a front line. On one side, archaic privileges rooted in skin color and social status. On the other, a new generation daring to stand for justice and equality. Karen couldn't hide her smug grin, looking at Maya as if she'd won, and Jessica, hands trembling with shame, still lacked the nerve to correct the injustice. Trevor merely nodded to security, as though checking off a chore. As Maya was escorted out of first class, dozens of eyes followed her, some sympathetic, some admiring, others heavy with guilt for witnessing cruelty they neither could nor dared to halt. A young man rose, phone in hand, calling out, "She did nothing wrong. This is discrimination." A woman wept quietly, sobbing to her friend. "She's the first black woman I've seen stand up for herself in first class." But all remained helpless as Maya was led down the aisle, her footsteps and the officer's stiff strides forming a mournful melody that echoed down the airport corridor. Outside the cabin, in the VIP lounge, Maya was asked to wait while the matter was resolved. She didn't argue or cry. Instead, she opened her phone, drafted an email to her lawyer and communications team, attaching the video footage and images. Then she texted her assistant, "Prepare all documentation. This isn't over." Back on the flight, as the door closed and the aircraft prepared for takeoff without Maya, first class felt colder than any low thermostat setting. Karen sank into seat 2A. Jessica's hand shook as she served a compensatory glass of champagne, and Trevor slumped in his seat, trying to mask his unease behind a hardened facade. Some passengers whispered, others immediately uploaded videos to social media, and a few vowed to file formal complaints the moment they landed. In that first-class cabin, everyone came to understand. They'd witnessed more than just a forced removal. They'd seen a young black woman publicly shamed for standing up for what was right. Beyond the airport lights, Maya Richardson sat tall, her eyes blazing in the dim lounge. If anyone thought she'd be broken by being expelled from first class, they were wrong. She knew the real story was just beginning. This recorded humiliation, witnessed by dozens on board and countless more online, would ignite a fire not only beneath one airline, but beneath the invisible barriers that still cling to privilege in modern society. And with everything she'd endured, Maya no longer represented only herself, but millions who've been forced from their rightful places, whether in boardrooms, classrooms, or across the vast skies of America. While Maya Richardson quietly sat in the VIP lounge, her fingers scrolling through the footage she'd just captured, a parallel drama was unfolding on the very aircraft that had just closed its doors and was taxiing toward the runway. There, the truth was slowly slipping out from beneath the shadow of entrenched power and privilege. Every moment of injustice, every furtive glance, every smug smile, every thinly veiled threat had been recorded not only by Maya's phone, but also by eyewitnesses who could no longer stand by silently. Chief among them was Samantha Brooks, a young passenger with dark brown hair pulled into a high ponytail, dressed in a simple gray hoodie, her sharp eyes betraying the instincts of an embedded reporter. Seated just a few rows from Maya, Samantha's light brown skin stood out against the cabin's pristine white leather. She was the one who first panned her camera to catch Jessica whispering to Karen and discreetly pocketing the folded bills. She zoomed in to capture Trevor tucking cash into his breast pocket, complete with his knowing smirk and cold grin. In Samantha's nearly 8-minute video, nothing was left unshown. Jessica's awkward, complicit look as she tried to persuade Maya to give up her seat. Karen's insincere bow and bitter declaration, "I always sit here, it belongs to me." Trevor's arrogant shake of the head when Maya refused, and finally the scene of security forcing Maya to stand and leave first class before a dozen helpless onlookers. Most damning of all, Karen slipping a wad of bills into Jessica's hand, and Trevor's, accompanied by her hushed yet unmistakable thanks. "Thank you for upholding first-class standards." With the savvy of a digital-age citizen, Samantha didn't wait for anyone else to act. Moments after the aircraft leveled off, she opened her laptop, edited the footage, added English subtitles, and overlaid the headline, "Black woman with platinum status kicked out of her first-class seat to make room for a white VIP." Cash changed hands. Less than 15 minutes after the plane touched down at JFK, the video was live on Twitter, X, tagged Skylux Discrimination and Justice for Maya, and directly mentioning Skylux Airlines' official account and the nation's top 3 news outlets. The public outcry was instantaneous. Individuals fumed. "This is 2025, not 1955. Unbelievable. She paid for the seat. She has the card. What more does she need? White skin?" Soon, the mainstream media joined in. CNN ran the banner. Viral video shows, Black CEO removed from first-class seat, despite valid ticket, discrimination allegations, rock Skylux Airlines. The New York Times editorialized, a stark example of the latent prejudice still plaguing America. Fox News re-aired the clip, decrying the hypocrisy of the luxury service industry. But it didn't stop with traditional outlets. TikTokers, YouTubers, and equality advocates all reshared the footage, each offering their own analysis under hashtag #JusticeForMaya and hashtag #SkyluxDiscrimination. Within 6 hours, Samantha's video had racked up 1.2 million views and ranked among Twitter's top 3 global trends. Hundreds of thousands of comments, shares, and direct tags to Skylux demanded a public accounting and meaningful action. No mere perfunctory apology. Influential voices weighed in. A prominent black tech CEO tweeted, "Today it's Maya. Tomorrow it could be any of us. If we don't stop this, injustice will simply change faces, not disappear." Anti-racism organizations hosted live-stream panels, citing systemic bias in luxury services and recounting similar long-silenced incidents. And it wasn't only people of color. White, Asian American, and Latino users alike expressed shame and outrage at Skylux's craven defense of outdated privilege. On Skylux's own website, the Contact Us inbox was bombarded. Hundreds of emails, thousands of calls, all demanding full disclosure of the staff involved, of Karen Whitfield's role, and whether this was how Skylux had long treated guests deemed unsuitable. Inside Skylux's executive boardroom, the atmosphere was as tense as that morning's first-class cabin. Senior leaders scrambled to mobilize legal, PR, and key partners, issuing urgent statements, but social media's tidal wave was beyond any crisis management script. Maya herself was astonished by the force of truth's momentum. In the airport lounge, she received hundreds of supportive messages and emails from across America and the globe. People sent screenshots and alternate angles, building an indisputable dossier. A renowned civil rights attorney messaged, "Let us protect you. This truth will not be buried." Human rights groups worldwide used Samantha's footage as a textbook case of racism cloaked in luxury. Remarkably, within Skylux's own ranks, junior and middle-level employees began sharing the video internally, voicing disgust at the leadership. One wrote on their intranet, "If this is our idea of service values, I'm ashamed to wear this uniform." In under 24 hours, Skylux discrimination had become a top global trend, fueling demands for change and justice for Maya Richardson and anyone ever forced from their rightful first-class seat because of skin color, age, gender, or any other difference. At the heart of that storm stands the image of Maya, rising calmly from her seat, refusing to bow or weep, phone in hand, confidence unshaken. She has become the emblem of a new generation of justice, unafraid, unyielding, and never alone. The truth is out. It cannot be returned to the shadows of an outdated privilege system. And this is only the beginning of irreversible upheaval for Skylux Airlines and the entire luxury service industry in America. The air inside Skylux Airlines' glittering Chicago headquarters had never felt as oppressive as that morning. As the wave of online outrage erupted, the top-floor boardroom became a gathering point for anxious stares, incessant phone alerts, furrowed brows, and frantic keyboard taps. But in that very moment, a horrifying secret, one that only a handful of executives had ever even whispered about, was exposed, igniting genuine panic among the company's upper echelons. Richard Williams, Skylux's seasoned CEO, had weathered every corporate battlefield in his career, but he had never been cornered like this. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring down at the bumper-to-bumper traffic below, his grip tightening on his personal cell phone. Dozens of urgent emails and partner messages flooded his screen by the minute. Then came a call from the Vice President of External Affairs that froze the room. "Mr. Williams, we have a major problem. That video is going global, but that's not all. The woman who was kicked off this morning's flight is Maya Richardson." At first, Williams frowned, trying to place the name among Skylux's VIP roster. Only when the VP forwarded an internal dossier and Maya's LinkedIn photo did it hit him like a lightning bolt. His throat went dry. The file read, "Maya Richardson, founder and CEO, RightTech Solutions, exclusive AI provider to multiple global service brands, holds 25% of Skylux Airlines via affiliated investment funds. Sole candidate for current $50 million digital transformation contract." Every sound in Williams' head went silent. 25%. Not just a stake, but effective control over every major board vote. A number that could overthrow any corporate plan and end any CEO's tenure with a single decisive vote. And that $50 million contract was Skylux's lifeline in a cutthroat era of AI-driven competitors. Without RightTech and without Maya, every digital upgrade, service innovation, and cost-cutting measure would collapse. If this news hit the markets, Skylux's stock would nosedive, investors would pull out en masse, and a domino effect of defaults would follow. Before he could gather himself, his phone buzzed again with calls from Wall Street's most powerful voices. "Richard, what on earth is happening? We just saw the clip on CNBC. Explain this now. If you don't contain this crisis within 24 hours, we'll have to liquidate our holdings. Is it true your airline just ejected RightTech's CEO from a first-class seat?" Around the table, board members scrambled for laptops and phones, firing off emergency emails to their attorneys in case of the coming storm. Sweat beaded at the back of Williams' neck. He knew exactly what this meant. Maya Richardson wasn't just a VIP customer. She held Skylux's fate in her hands, not only through her shares, but through RightTech's critical technology, its partner network, and now the world's outrage. What terrified Williams most wasn't just that Maya could pull the plug on every contract and send investors fleeing, but that his company had blindly nurtured this ticking time bomb for years, with its own privileged practices, and today that bomb had detonated. As legal and PR teams mobilized to craft damage control statements, Samantha Brooks's video continued its wildfire spread. Not only CEOs and fund managers, but mid-level Skylux managers were panicking as they realized Maya was far more than a victim. She had the power, the savvy, and the composure to push this crisis to the breaking point. And she hadn't even spoken yet. That silence, to Williams, was more terrifying than any accusation. In that moment, Richard Williams understood that Skylux's leadership had long lived in a fantasy of luxury service, where power was measured by skin color, personal connections, and familiarity. forgetting that in the new era, real influence, tangible value, and human dignity were the true determinants of survival. Then the first messages from Maya appeared in William's inbox, coolly courteous, precisely worded, and not a single emotional outburst. I request an emergency shareholder meeting to address your corporate culture, personnel policies, and the impact of this incident on the current digital transformation contract. I am prepared to cooperate within legal frameworks. Williams swallowed hard, grasping for any sliver of hope, but he knew in his bones this was no longer an internal matter. It was a life-or-death battle for an entire empire. Before him lay the wreckage of every outdated privilege and every obsolete power play, buried by a single, unjust expulsion, executed in public, with the victim being the most powerful woman Skylux had ever known. The nightmare had begun, and for Richard Williams all he could do was try to salvage a ship already foundering in a storm with no way out. The terse, icy message Maya Richardson sent to Richard Williams' personal inbox and to the entire Skylux Airlines board felt like a lightning bolt, splitting the already suffocating atmosphere in two. Under the subject line, urgent meeting request, shareholder rights, corporate ethics, future collaboration, Maya spared no word. She demanded a fully attended online shareholder meeting at 4 p.m. that very day, a deadline that could not be ignored. What no one at Skylux headquarters suspected was that this was merely the opening move in a meticulously orchestrated counterstrike, one Maya seemed to have anticipated long ago. Behind the calm silence of this young woman lay a professional apparatus equal to any multinational. Elite lawyers, heavyweight communications specialists, and top-tier strategic advisors in technology and finance. Within an hour of her email, Maya's legal team was assembled in RightTech's New York boardroom, primed to build their case and coordinate media responses. Every minute detail of that morning's in-flight incident was dissected and reassembled from dozens of eyewitness angles, especially Samantha Brooks's video, whose irrefutable audio and visuals would prove decisive. "We're not just protecting Maya's personal rights," declared lead counsel Raymond Oliver. "We're defending the rights of everyone ever excluded from first class anywhere in the world." Simultaneously, RightTech's head of communications, Michelle Carter, dispatched official notices to every major news outlet, confirming Maya would speak at the emergency shareholder meeting and pledging absolute transparency, refusing to tolerate any excuses from Skylux. The media wave crashed back onto Skylux's shores instantly. Reporters from CNN, Bloomberg, and the New York Times flooded the airline's offices, demanding press credentials or exclusive interviews with Maya. International finance publications even printed the shareholder meeting schedule and anticipated announcement time, as though it were a global economic summit. At Skylux, Richard Williams fidgeted at the head of the table, decades seeming to age him within hours. He pored over Maya's email for the 10th time, each read revealing the crushing weight of her words. As Skylux Airlines' largest shareholder and legal representative of RightTech Solutions, I hereby demand an urgent meeting with the full board and all shareholders. In that meeting, I will present incontrovertible evidence of this morning's ethics violations, discrimination and bribery, directly implicating Trevor Davis, cabin supervisor, Jessica Miller, lead flight attendant, and Captain James Reynolds. I require that Skylux Airlines immediately terminate these individuals and publicly disclose the reasons and remedial actions. If these demands are not fully met within 24 hours, I will invoke the share transfer clause, divesting my entire 25% stake in Skylux Airlines into international funds and voiding the $50 million contract between RightTech Solutions and your company. The legal, financial, and reputational consequences of this incident will rest squarely with Skylux's leadership. No apologies, no tears. Each sentence was an uncompromising ultimatum: justice or the collapse of an airline empire. Silence gripped the boardroom. A few directors had opened their mouths to defend long-serving executives like Trevor or Reynolds, but the video evidence, clear down to Karen Whitfield's every gesture and the crisp bills sliding into Trevor's pocket, left them mute. No one dared stake their career, fortune, or reputation on excusing those who'd already lost all legitimacy. In that moment, Richard Williams realized Maya's counter-strike wasn't personal revenge. It was a lesson Skylux would pay dearly for. A reckoning on corporate culture, leadership accountability, and the power of transparency. Even the story's antagonists were now laid bare. Trevor Davis, once the absolute authority in first class, now trembling as he drafted his statement, knowing there was no going back. Jessica Miller, tears in her eyes, haunted by her own cowardice and complicity. Captain James Reynolds, proud for 3 decades in command of the skies, now forced to face disciplinary proceedings, his momentary lapse erasing a lifetime of service. Meanwhile, on the other side of that corporate divide, Maya calmly strategized with her lawyers. She spoke little, focusing instead on contingencies. If Skylux refused to comply, she would release every video, email, and witness affidavit to international media and file a class action suit in federal court. If Skylux offered concessions, she would demand independent oversight of all HR processes, corporate culture reforms, and a board-level restructure, placing right tech appointees in director seats. And, if necessary, she was ready to rally other investors to divest their holdings in. Solidarity, a corporate nuclear option only the battle-hardened would dare deploy. The emergency shareholder meeting was just hours away. The hush in Skylux's halls was no calm. It was the gathering storm before the break. Outside, millions of eyes watched. Could a lone Maya Richardson uproot a deeply entrenched privilege system? Would Skylux Airlines choose justice or sink into darkness alongside those who once believed themselves untouchable? For Maya, every move was already in place. This time, justice would no longer be a luxury reserved for first class. The echo of Maya Richardson's ultimatum still vibrated through every anxious breath in Skylux Airlines headquarters as the clock neared the start of the emergency shareholder meeting. In its 30-year history, the board had never entered a room feeling so fragile and powerless. From their familiar high-end leather chairs, they were used to hearing revenue reports, expansion plans, and praise for their luxury brand. Yet, today, every gaze was fixed on the large screen, where Maya Richardson's name appeared not just as the largest shareholder, but as the arbiter of the company's fate. On the other side of the screen, Maya appeared against the tasteful blue and white backdrop of Righttech's New York office. Her minimalist black suit only underscored the calm determination in her eyes and the firm set of her lips. Flanking her were seasoned lawyers, each armed with a laptop and notebooks filled with meticulous notes and contingency plans. Richard Williams, once celebrated as a master negotiator, had spent the entire night drafting dozens of ways to mitigate the fallout. A public apology, increased dividends for Maya, even a seat on the board with veto power. But he soon realized this was no longer a high-stakes bargaining session among shrewd investors. Maya's gaze, icy, principled, gave no hint of concession. The meeting began under a tension as taut as a drawn bow. The board chairman opened with a brief statement, acknowledging a serious incident, its negative impact on the Skylux brand, and promising a full investigation. Everyone knew, however, the real question. What did Maya want? And could Skylux preserve its corporate soul, or would it succumb to a new power, or worse, collapse entirely? Maya calmly presented the evidence: videos, audio recordings, witness testimony, images of Karen Whitfield passing cash to Jessica and Trevor, and Captain Reynolds' abdication of responsibility. She detailed each violation: Trevor's threatening tone, Jessica's complicit bow, Reynolds' indifferent inaction, highlighting the ethical breaches, discrimination, and abuse of authority. With every slide, heads around the table sank lower. No one could still claim ignorance. No one could defensively cling to the privilege system now fully exposed. All the glamorous marketing slogans, service above all, suddenly rang bitterly hollow. Richard Williams stood struggling to appear composed. "Miss Richardson, we accept full responsibility and extend our personal apology to you and to all customers and shareholders harmed by this incident. However, I ask you to reconsider the dismissal of our 3 long-serving employees, Trevor, Jessica, and Captain Reynolds. They have dedicated years to this company and may have simply made a temporary lapse." Maya cut in, her voice calm but resolute, allowing no room for entreaties or negotiations. "Mr. Williams, the issue here isn't just those 3 individuals. It's an entire system that has enabled and protected privilege and prejudice for years. Any organization committed to sustainable growth must take real accountability and cannot shield those who violate its core values. If Skylux cannot do that, I will withdraw my entire stake and end our partnership." A silence erupted like a rupture. A few progressive shareholders voiced support for Maya. They understood that if Maya walked away, a cascade of divestments from other investors would follow. A virtual death sentence for Skylux. Under that immense pressure, from Maya, from public outrage, from investors, and from long disillusioned employees, the board made historic decisions. Trevor Davis, Jessica Miller, and Captain James Reynolds would be terminated immediately, with their dismissals and the reasons made public to the press and customers. Within half an hour, the official statement appeared on Skylux's website, social media channels, and internal news feeds. "We regret to announce that Trevor Davis, cabin supervisor, Jessica Miller, lead flight attendant, and Captain James Reynolds have been dismissed for professional misconduct, failure to uphold our service standards, and serious damage to Skylux Airlines' reputation. The company pledges a thorough investigation and comprehensive reforms to restore the trust of our customers and shareholders." At that moment in Skylux's headquarters, the atmosphere reached its zenith of tension. Trevor Davis left the room pale and ashamed, unable to make eye contact. Jessica Miller sobbed openly as she packed her belongings, tears streaming down her face, and Captain Reynolds, more silent than all, clutched his flight cap as if holding on to decades of a career shattered in a single day. The heavy click of the boardroom doors as the trio walked down the long, cold hallway marked the end of an era of entitlement, and served as a stark warning to anyone still nursing illusions of invincibility in the old regime. Meanwhile, Maya Richardson showed no trace of triumph. She simply exhaled, her gaze fixed on the screen, where, for the first time in years, justice had begun to shift, even at a steep price. For her, however, truth, conviction, and an uncompromising spirit were the only foundations on which a company, or even an entire corporate culture, could be reborn. That dark day in Skylux's history would be remembered not for shame, but because it opened the door to genuine change, from the ground up, leaving no room for privilege or the shadows of prejudice. In the days following Skylux's seismic firings, the storm of outrage across the media and social networks only intensified, and it swept away the last masks of those who once believed themselves untouchable. The moment the dismissals of Trevor Davis, Jessica Miller, and Captain James Reynolds were announced, every major news outlet and social platform pivoted away from being just Maya Richardson's story or Skylux's scandal, treating it instead as an indictment of an entire generation of entrenched gatekeepers. Trevor Davis, once proud to reign supreme in first class, became a fixture in headlines and viral parody videos on TikTok, Twitter, and Reddit. His face appeared everywhere, from sober news broadcasts to mocking memes labeled "the gatekeeper of discrimination" and "Trevor, last bastion of white privilege." Clips of his cold, contemptuous glare at Maya replayed constantly alongside thousands of furious comments. Every job application Trevor sent, to major airlines and small regional carriers alike, was rejected outright. Though once celebrated as Skylux's standards enforcer, he was now branded an accomplice to racism, a cautionary example in HR training at other airlines. Belated interviews and on-camera apologies could not cleanse his shame. The man who once wielded power in the sky was today lost on terra firma. Jessica Miller fared no better. The lead flight attendant, once lauded by VIPs for her tact and charm, became a symbol of cowardice and complicity. Netizens dissected every gesture in the footage: her averted eyes, her silence at the bribe, her forced smile as she pressured Maya to move. Former colleagues, once envious of her rapid rise, passed around internal messages. "I can't believe someone who preached 'the customer is everything' could so easily turn away from justice." No airline would return Jessica's job applications. Even service industry firms outside aviation balked, wary of her reputation as the poster child for complicity. Friends offered sympathetic words, but their counsel only underscored the heavy price of silence. Night after night, Jessica reread hundreds of scathing online comments, tears falling as she regretted choosing safety over doing what was right. And Captain James Reynolds, a legend among pilots who'd flown through storms and saved countless lives, couldn't weather the backlash. In U.S. aviation, one's reputation is the strongest passport. After the scandal, no carrier dared hire a captain who had willfully ignored duty and abetted privilege, regardless of his stellar resume. Every rejection email shared the same line: "We value your experience, but the position has been filled." Reynolds's former peers offered condolences or quietly distanced themselves. No one mentioned his past heroics in the air. His name landed on "do not hire" lists at 3 major airlines. Each time he drove past an airport watching jets take off, he clenched his jaw to keep from breaking down. His pride and authority, shattered by a single lapse, had cost him everything he built over decades. But the tragedy didn't end with those in uniform. Karen Whitfield, the powerful passenger whose stack of bills and whispered hints had ignited this crisis, also faced social reckoning. Days later, the board of the law firm where she was a founding partner convened an emergency session and suspended her indefinitely, pending an independent ethics investigation. Headlines branded her Airline Karen, Queen of Privilege, and the cash-stuffed first-class seat. On Twitter, #AirlineKaren trended globally, spawning tens of thousands of memes and caricatures depicting her Hermes bag and smug smirk. She became the archetype of an elite more reliant on entitlement than merit. Her firm's contracts were canceled, and partners hastily removed her name from every project bearing her imprint. Friends and former associates shunned her, muting her in group chats, unfollowing her on social media. At high society events, no one dared utter her name with respect. Some even sighed in relief, treating Karen's fall as the inevitable reckoning for years of bending rules to suit her ego. Journalists delved into Karen's past, uncovering a pattern of using money to smooth over disputes at swanky restaurants and luxury hotels, always escaping scrutiny thanks to her status and the complicity of onlookers. This time, however, every shield had shattered. Every hush-money tactic was powerless against the unstoppable force of digital media. And, as an inevitable ripple effect, not only Karen, Trevor, Jessica, and Reynolds were held to account, so too were the enablers who covered for them. Equality advocates cited the scandal as a textbook case of privilege's danger and the power of silent complicity. The reverberations of that dark chapter reached far beyond Skylux's walls. It ceased to be an abstract corporate culture lesson and became a harsh reality. In the digital age of transparency, every injustice will be exposed, and the price paid will never be cheap, no matter who you are or what power you once wielded. For Maya Richardson, the most important fact wasn't the downfall of those individuals, but the door that had been flung open to a new culture, one where justice's voice rings loud enough to drown out all excuses, and where every person must face themselves when confronted with the truth. The aftermath of those crisis days, of news reports saturated with the names of those who once held all the power, was not the end of Skylux Airlines but a wake-up call forcing the entire system to look inward. With public outrage still simmering and #Justice for Maya burning bright, Maya Richardson emerged not as an avenger, but as the architect of new standards for a luxury, service industry long rotted by privilege and hidden bias. Because Maya retained her 25% stake, and her reputation as someone who publicly challenged injustice, every overture from Skylux had to come from genuine goodwill. After sleepless nights of closed-door negotiations, an unprecedented decision in U.S. aviation history was announced to press and shareholders alike. All Skylux Airlines operations will be suspended for 48 hours to conduct mandatory anti-racism and unconscious bias training for every employee, from flight attendants, pilots, and cabin supervisors up to the senior executive team. At the following morning's press conference, Maya stood beside CEO Richard Williams, both their expressions mirroring the gravity of the moment. Maya spoke succinctly, without flourish. "We cannot undo what has happened, but we can begin to change starting today. Justice isn't just punishing individuals, it's about building a new system where everyone relearns how to respect others, regardless of background, skin color, or status." This wasn't a theoretical lecture or the usual check-the-box exercise corporations resort to when scandal hits. Maya collaborated directly with psychologists, diversity and inclusion advisors, and RightTech Solutions AI team to design immersive simulations. Every employee engaged in realistic role plays, experiencing both the victim's and the perpetrator's perspective, to confront their own biases and question every unconscious prejudice they harbored. Skylux's boardrooms and airport lounges nationwide became temporary training centers. Flights were grounded. Passengers were rebooked on partner lines or issued full refunds. Though the move cost millions in just 2 days, the media hailed it as unprecedented and the most positive shock in U.S. aviation history. Major networks, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all ran live coverage of Maya and Richard Williams taking the podium, pledging accountability and stressing the necessity of facing uncomfortable truths, even when those truths expose the system's deepest wounds. On social media, deep-dive analyses of the training program and clips of Skylux employees sharing their feelings about sitting down to relearn how to treat people flooded the feeds. Comments poured in. If an airline can admit its mistakes and start over, what excuse do banks, hotels, or restaurants have for staying silent? Within Skylux, employees who had quietly witnessed, or even benefited from the unwritten codes of privilege were forced to confront themselves. Some grumbled that the shutdown was over the top or a needless financial blow, yet more spoke out in support. For the first time, I truly believe Skylux will change. I've waited 10 years for this and never dared to speak up. Independent experts joined the advisory board to ensure the training wouldn't be mere window dressing and that the hardest issues wouldn't be glossed over. An anonymous post-training survey revealed over 83% of employees had witnessed or participated in unfair situations, but remained silent out of fear, for job security or social isolation. The findings stunned Skylux leadership. The darkness of bias ran deeper than any internal audit had ever shown. For the so-called villains, Trevor, Jessica, Reynolds, and Karen, their downfall became a living case study. Their actions were woven into training materials and discussion groups, asking every employee, "When you face injustice, will you align with the victim or turn away, whether the person harmed is a passenger or a colleague?" International media, from the UK, France, and Germany to Japan and South Korea, held up Skylux as an example of bold cultural reform, something few corporations dare to carry out in full. From the smallest huddle to the grandest hall, from executives to janitors, a single question echoed, "How many more Maya Richardsons have been forced from their rightful seats simply because of prejudice?" By working relentlessly with Maya, Skylux not only rescued its reputation but began rebuilding trust with customers, employees, and previously wavering investors. Above all, they ignited a reform ensuring that every first-class seat goes to those who truly deserve it, no matter skin color, age, gender, status, or any other trappings of privilege. From here on, Skylux Airlines truly takes flight on a foundation of justice and equality. Honestly, not merely as a marketing slogan. In the days after Skylux's earth-shaking dismissals, the media and social media outrage didn't die down. It spread farther and faster, stripping away the last masks of those who once thought themselves invincible. The instant the news broke that Trevor Davis, Jessica Miller, and Captain James Reynolds were fired, headlines and hashtags shifted from Maya Richardson's story or a Skylux scandal to a broader indictment of an entire generation of gatekeepers. Trevor Davis, once proud to be king of first class, suddenly became a punchline in viral TikToks, tweets, and Reddit memes. His face appeared everywhere, from serious news segments to sarcastic memes calling him the gatekeeper of discrimination and Trevor, last bastion of white privilege. Endless clips of his cold, contemptuous glare at Maya replayed alongside torrents of enraged comments. Every resume Trevor submitted, to major carriers and small regional lines alike, was rejected outright. Once celebrated as Skylux's standards enforcer, he was now branded a racist enabler, a cautionary tale in HR trainings everywhere. Televised apologies and late interviews couldn't wash away the stain. The man, who once held sky-high authority, now found himself lost on solid ground. Jessica Miller fared no better. The lead flight attendant, once praised by VIPs for her grace under pressure, became a symbol of cowardice and complicity. Netizens dissected her every gesture in the footage, her averted eyes, her silence in the face of a bribe, her forced smile as she pressed Maya to give up her seat. Former colleagues, once envious of her rapid rise, now whispered, "Who knew someone who preached, 'The customer is everything,' could so easily abandon justice?" No airline would touch Jessica's applications. Even non-aviation customer service firms balked, unwilling to hire the poster child for collusion. Friends offered sympathetic words, but each one drove home the cost of her silence. Night after night, Jessica reread hundreds of scathing online remarks, tears falling as she regretted choosing safety over doing what was right. And Captain James Reynolds, a legend among pilots, renowned for flying through storms and saving lives, couldn't withstand the public and moral storm. In aviation, your reputation is your most precious credential. But after the scandal, no carrier dared risk hiring a captain who had willfully ignored duty and abetted privilege, no matter how stellar his flight record. Every rejection email read the same. "We value your experience, but the position has been filled." Reynolds' old peers offered condolences or quietly distanced themselves. No one spoke of his past heroics in the air. His name landed on the do not rehire lists at 3 major airlines. Driving past airports, watching jets take off, he clenched his jaw to keep from breaking down. A lifetime's pride in his authority, undone by one misstep. But the fallout didn't stop at those in uniform. Karen Whitfield, the powerful passenger whose stack of cash and whispered demands had set everything in motion, also faced social exile. Days after the incident, the law firm where she was a founding partner held an emergency board meeting and suspended her indefinitely, pending an independent ethics inquiry. Her name splashed across headlines as Airline Karen, Queen of Privilege, and the cash-stuffed first-class seat. On Twitter, #Airline Karen trended globally, spawning thousands of memes lampooning her Hermes bag and smirk, turning her into the poster child for an elite that prizes entitlement over merit. Her firm's contracts were canceled. Partners rushed to sever ties with anything bearing her name. Friends and former associates shunned her, muting her in group chats, unfollowing her on social platforms. At high society events, no one dared mention Karen Whitfield with anything other than disdain. Some even sighed in relief, treating her downfall as the inevitable reckoning for years of bending the rules to feed her ego. Journalists dug into Karen's past, uncovering a trail of using money to smooth over conflicts at high-end restaurants and luxury hotels, always escaping scrutiny thanks to status and silent bystanders. This time, however, every shield crumbled. Every hush-money tactic failed against the unstoppable force of digital media. And as an inevitable ripple effect, not only Karen, Trevor, Jessica, and Reynolds were held to account, but so too were the enablers who covered for them. Equality advocates cited the scandal as a classic case of the danger of privilege and the power of silent complicity. The echoes of that dark chapter reached far beyond Skylux's walls. It ceased to be an abstract corporate culture lesson and became a harsh reality. In the digital age of transparency, every injustice will be exposed, and the price paid will never be cheap, no matter who you are or what power you once wielded. For Maya Richardson, the most important fact wasn't the downfall of these individuals, but that a door had been flung open to a new culture, one where the voice of justice rings loud enough to drown out every excuse, and where everyone must face themselves when confronted with the truth. Since relaunching under a wave of reform, Maya Richardson's role has gone beyond that of shareholder or corporate culture architect. For her, the real victory isn't simply seeing those who did wrong removed. It's ensuring that every team member, even those who caused harm, gets a genuine chance to change, to grow, to reintegrate, and to help repair the damage they once inflicted. To that end, Maya founded Second Chance, an unprecedented initiative in American business. Unlike the usual token one-day workshops, Second Chance is a comprehensive, months-long support and retraining ecosystem. Participants undergo rigorous assessments of their awareness, behavior, emotional growth, and personal progress. Its guiding principle is simple: no one is born perfect. true forgiveness and growth only come when people dare to face the truth, accept responsibility, and relearn how to live better. Remarkably, the three figures at the heart of Skylux's crisis, Trevor Davis, Jessica Miller, and Captain James Reynolds, volunteered as the program's first participants, under intense media and public scrutiny. Once symbols of entitlement, complicity, and indifference, they now represent a difficult path of atonement. Trevor Davis, once proud in his crisp cabin supervisor uniform, now sits quietly in a plain t-shirt, fingers tracing the spiral binding of the notebook he's opening for the first time in years. In early sessions, he rationalized and denied, blaming circumstances, pressure, even unwritten rules. But the trainers didn't let him off easy. Have you ever asked yourself why you valued power more than another person's dignity? Each discussion forced Trevor to confront his own history, childhood messages of racial superiority, the unconscious arrogance of power he'd called procedure. The climax came when he watched the footage of himself mocking and humiliating Maya before a captive audience, then heard firsthand from victims, not via complaint emails but in direct, honest dialogue. On one occasion, Trevor broke down in front of the class. I never saw myself as a bad person, but I let myself become a tool of a system without ever pausing to think. I'm sorry. I want to make amends, not just to get my job back, but to reclaim who I am. Jessica Miller, who once stayed silent out of fear of losing her job, struggled equally. In her first session, she avoided eye contact, but a second chance compelled her to open up, sharing memories of being bullied, of always feeling not good enough, and of the helplessness she felt when colleagues were treated unfairly and she stayed silent. I chose safety over justice. I know I hurt others out of fear. Now I want to learn to speak up, even if no one stands with me. Jessica participated in simulations where she faced power directly, choosing between personal safety and standing up for truth. The reflex to stay quiet and get by was dismantled as every action was respectfully challenged, heard, and examined, by peers and by those who'd once been harmed. Captain James Reynolds, despite his seniority, showed the deepest transformation. For him, following procedure had always been the ultimate shield against moral responsibility. But when asked to rewrite every incident report from the passenger's perspective, especially those he had wronged, he wept openly. I thought that as long as I didn't break any rules, I'd done my duty. I forgot the heart of aviation, to protect every passenger equally. I want to spend the rest of my career teaching this lesson to the next generation. Second Chance went far beyond dry lectures. Maya brought in psychologists, social justice advocates, victims of service industry discrimination, and even high school students to share their experiences. Participants completed community engagement projects, serving pro bono in underserved areas, partnering with civil rights organizations, taking part in mock court sessions, and directly talking with those harmed. Every trainee also wrote a public apology letter, outlining their new understanding of privilege's consequences and pledging never to repeat those mistakes. These letters were published on the Second Chance website for community feedback and even constructive critique. No one emerges from Second Chance without a profound reckoning, but the extraordinary result is that, after several months, Trevor, Jessica, and Reynolds each transformed, not into defensive or evasive figures, but into people who truly grasp equality's value, the courage in admitting mistakes, and the deep meaning of a society that offers genuine second chances. At the program's conclusion, Maya made no grand speech. She simply watched each person walk out the classroom door, knowing that every well-timed second chance can change a life, and, more importantly, can inspire an entire community to forgive, to grow, to correct course, and to leave no one behind. Second Chance quickly spread, becoming a model for businesses of all sizes across the United States. From that point on, every story of error, transformation, and growth, of individuals once cast as antagonists, became the most powerful testament to a true justice system that believes in giving everyone the opportunity to start anew, no matter how lost they once were. Second Chance wasn't just another training course. It was a months-long journey into people's egos, regrets, and their fervent desire to change, especially for those who'd once been the villains of the Skylux crisis. Here, each of them began their true rebirth, not with hollow vows, but through profound shifts in everyday thoughts, words, and deeds. Trevor Davis, once the epitome of cold authority and unspoken rules, emerged completely transformed. This wasn't a surface-level makeover or a PR stunt. It was a genuine internal overhaul so deep that even his oldest friends barely recognized him. In one class discussion, Trevor stood, hands trembling, yet eyes burning with resolve, and shared his conservative Chicago suburb upbringing, where outsiders were always greeted with sneers and harsh warnings. He confessed he'd believed he was free of prejudice, just honoring tradition, until confronting the flight deck video of himself mocking Maya, replaying his empty threats and lies. He realized, painfully, that the most dangerous bias hides quietly in the minds of those who think themselves just normal. Trevor didn't return to aviation. Instead, he joined youth mentorship programs in his community, leading unconscious bias workshops in schools, using his own story as a cautionary tale, a man who thought he did nothing wrong until his world collapsed. He started blogging, gave interviews, and spoke at social justice conferences, not to salvage his reputation, but to challenge people like him. If you stay silent in the face of injustice, you become part of it. He also personally apologized to former colleagues he'd belittled, helping them find job leads and community connections. Trevor's transformation inspired many. Nobody must stay imprisoned by a shameful past if they genuinely seek to make amends. Jessica Miller, once the poster child of fear and complicity, shed her old shell too. She'd long thought the line between being nice and being complicit was razor thin. In the early days of Second Chance, Jessica avoided eye contact. Terrified, classmates would see only a frightened woman who stayed silent. But with support from psychologists and fellow trainees, she stared down her past, no more denials or excuses, and learned to ask herself, what matters more, personal safety or doing what's right? Jessica then rejoined customer service at a local airport, assisting special needs travelers. There, she defended minority passengers, called out colleagues' bias, and even accepted isolation to stand up for justice. She shared her journey at industry panels, urging new flight attendants. Speak up, even when the cost might be your job or your career. Jessica also volunteered at centers supporting victims of violence, teaching communication, self-advocacy, and above all, the courage to break the silence. Her once trembling voice became warm and steadfast. One voice can be a small candle in the dark, but many candles banish the night. Captain James Reynolds, the battle-hardened pilot known for his unflappable command, found new purpose in his later years. Being shunned by the industry struck him hard. He'd believed reputation was eternal. But in Second Chance, Reynolds saw that many young pilots carried the same biases and dangerous silences he once did. He chose not to return to the cockpit. Instead, he became an instructor for aviation safety and equity programs, teaching recruits not only flight skills but leadership founded on fairness, empathy, and conscience. He often concluded his lectures with Maya's graduation day mantra, "In the sky, no one is small. Justice doesn't come from the uniform, but from the heart of the leader. Reynolds also partnered with international human rights organizations in transportation, sharing his experience to warn other airlines against repeating his mistakes. In his twilight years, he became known not for flight hours but for sowing empathy and understanding in the next generation. The rebirth of Trevor, Jessica, and Reynolds didn't happen overnight. It was forged through pain, remorse, and courageous effort under the world's gaze. They walked out of their pasts as living proof of a culture that forgives, grows, and dares to make things right, where personal growth becomes the greatest badge of honor. And when Maya Richardson reflected on the second chance journey, she understood those who dare to admit their faults and rise from the ashes are the strongest seeds for a truly fair, humane world, one where atonement isn't a stain, but a profound point of pride in our collective maturity. Since Skylux Airlines was reborn on the wings of sweeping reform, the American sky has never been clearer on flights bearing its logo. That revival isn't measured only in soaring financials or streaks of record revenues. It's proven by Skylux's ironclad new reputation for business ethics, public trust, and goodwill. What many airlines and even major corporations only dream of, Skylux has achieved by one bold act, confronting its failures head-on, overhauling from the roots, and daring to make things right. The proof of success goes beyond glowing international press or the return of VIP passengers burned by scandal. Customer satisfaction scores have jumped across every demographic: race, age, gender, background, survey after survey. Prestigious outlets have ranked Skylux among the top 5 U.S. companies for diversity and inclusion, a place where major investors now flock not just for profits, but to be part of this great story of rebirth. Skylux has rolled out synchronized programs for training, mentoring, minority community support, and restoring dignity to those once sidelined in service industries. No longer a byword for privileged luxury, Skylux now flies the banner of accountable fairness, an achievement even competitors must acknowledge. At the heart of this success stands Maya Richardson. As the youngest Black CEO to command respect in finance and tech, she's become a living emblem of compassion and courage. Media outlets, universities, and civic organizations invite her to speak, sharing how she took on injustice, fought without punishing wrongdoers, and instead offered them genuine second chances to atone, grow, and give back. Through her example of forgiveness and leadership, Maya has inspired a new generation of executives, not with iron-fisted slogans or a justice warrior persona, but with a steadfast belief that people matter more than power, and progress matters more than punishment. Human rights bodies and esteemed journals have named Maya among the world's most influential women in social innovation and ethical business. Yet, perhaps the greatest achievement isn't an airline, a booming share price, or a trophy on the shelf, but the profound shift in public consciousness about justice, bias, and redemption. Across forums everywhere, the tale of Skylux and its reformed villains, Trevor, Jessica, Reynolds, Karen, stands as living proof that justice is not just punishment or the end of wrongdoing. It's an invitation to grow, to heal, and to begin again. Nobody in our society is immune to error. Only a society bold enough to confront its flaws, correct them, forgive, and truly invest in each person's growth can claim true strength and civility. That is Maya Richardson's legacy to future generations. Justice isn't a line drawn between winners and losers. Justice is the bridge we all cross together, so no one is left behind. Under this new sky, every Skylux flight is more than a journey from city to city. It's a voyage of hope, dignity, and belief in a future where justice lives not only in the law, but in the human heart. The story may be closing here, but its message endures. True justice empowers everyone to rise, transforms mistakes into growth, and sparks a society that loves, forgives, and strives toward its highest ideals. Only by facing our hidden biases can we truly change. If you enjoyed this inspiring journey, please like and share this video with friends. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next great adventure. Thank you for flying with us.